In a fragile economic environment, housing market is one of the backbones of stability. However, the United States is experiencing severe problems when it comes to housing affordability. In this episode, we will uncover all the aspects of the crisis and how it affects the country's broader economy. But before continuing, consider subscribing to the channel. That way, you will ensure the production of the most exciting videos on economic topics. Overall condition of the market. Well, it is not a surprise that the U.S. economy is undergoing extremely rough times. Rising inflation and surging interest rates make it hard for average workers to meet the ends. The Congressional Research Service report in January shows how important is housing market for the American economy. Residential fixed investment, which includes expenditures on the construction of new single and multi-family structures, residential remodeling, and brokers' fees, accounted for $1.1 trillion, which is almost 5% of GDP as of 2021. Housing services, which includes all spending on housing services, renters' rents and utilities, and homeowners' imputed rent and utility payments in 2021, was estimated at $2.8 trillion, or 11.9% of America's GDP. Combined, spending within the housing market accounted for 16.7% of GDP in 2021, the report says. Considering the devastating effects of the housing market crisis in 2007 and 2009, millions of people in the U.S. rightfully worry about their future. Unfortunately, for average households, the perspective is gloomy. Due to rising interest rates, which have broken a 20-year record, potential buyers refrain from buying new homes. Thus, home sales and house prices have been dropping for over 8 months. According to the U.S. leading economists, families must prepare for the situation to become more unstable and dangerous. A veteran economist and Rosenberg research chief, David Rosenberg, says, "We have a massive housing bubble right now. Most of the household balance sheet is residential real estate and its equities." And Ian Shepherdson, the chief economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, adds, "Shepherdson believes the steep drop in home sales hasn't hit bottom yet, and even buyers who set their sights lower to cheaper houses will still face bigger mortgage payments." The growing housing supply shortage exacerbates the already grave housing market condition. Millions of Americans simply cannot afford to buy or rent a house, and there is no optimism that the situation will change. The Economic Policy Institution writes, the median asking rent in the United States rose above $2,000 for the first time in June 2022. Given that, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development sets the standard of affordability at 30% of household income, $2,000 per month would only be affordable for households earning at least $80,000 per year, well above the median U.S. household income $67,521. Overall, builders and construction firms could not keep up with the demand in the past 2 decades, and the U.S. housing market has fallen behind by over 5 million units. Plus, adding property destruction due to demolition or natural disasters, among other things, the total shortfall could be 6.8 million, according to the National Association of Realtors. Rising rent. One of the critical economic hardships in the housing market is that rent prices are increasing. Despite a minuscule decline in rent in August of the previous year, experts believe that above-average prices on rent will stay through the whole of 2023. Moreover, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas expects that year-over-year rental price growth will rise from 5.8% as of June 2022 to 8.4% as of May 2023. In addition, an upcoming Moody's Analytics forecast predicts a rent growth rate of 5% to 7% during that same time, says Thomas LaSalvia, a director of economic research at the financial analytics firm. In total, rent takes a substantial portion of a household's budget. As of 2020, 40% of the residents had to pay over 35% of their income on rent. And the last 2 decades of research on the housing market by Moody concluded that the housing has never been so expensive. According to the study, an American worker had to pay 3% more for the rent every decade, reaching a peak in 2022, when residents had to spend 30% of their budget, from 23% 20 years ago to 26% a decade ago. Considering low income, people are forced to continue renting houses and apartments, as they cannot afford the enormous down payment on the property. The recent research by NAR shows that the median national down payment was 13% in 2022, and for a home priced at $390,000, that adds up to over $50,000. Homelessness and evictions. This fuels two significant problems: homelessness and evictions. The recent data provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development found that nearly 600,000 Americans are unhoused on any night. Considering that now more households are renting instead of purchasing a home in America in the last 50 years, unsurprisingly, more people will encounter homelessness looking at the rent price surge. The housing market has also ignited a generational gap. Due to the astronomical increase in the average house price in America since the 1940s, the younger generation today is primarily a renter. According to Pew Research, young adults, those younger than 35, continue to be the most likely of all age groups to rent. In 2016, 65% of households headed by people younger than 35 were renting, up from 57% in 2006. For a notable demonstration, in 1940, an average house cost $30,000, while in 2000, the price increased to $120,000, adjusted to the inflation at the beginning of the century, culminating in 2016 when home prices rose twice as fast as inflation. And in nearly two-thirds of the country, housing price growth exceeded wage growth. Although there is some good news, such as U.S. existing home sales dropping to the lowest level in more than 12 years in January, but the pace of decline slowed, raising cautious optimism that the housing market slump could be close to reaching a bottom. Unfortunately, such bits of light won't help millions of Americans that are facing evictions. Throughout the year, evictions surged as the government aid depleted. In an article by NPR, the gravity of the situation is illustrated. In August 2021, the federal eviction on moratorium ended, and by March 2022, eviction filing doubled. People living in suburban areas have been affected the most, which indirectly demonstrates income disparity in the country. According to Princeton's Eviction Lab, over 3.5 million eviction cases are filed by landlords in the U.S. every year. Researchers compiled eviction judgment records from 74 U.S. metropolitan areas and found that as the number of evictions in city centers held steady from 2000 to 2016, the share of evictions in suburban areas increased in 58 of the metropolitan areas. Believe it or not, some of the studies show a correlation between eviction and death rates. For example, the study by Andrew Summerson from the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, using data from 2016 on both eviction rates and deaths in nearly 700 U.S. counties, says that policies that increase affordable housing and cushion against life events that lead to housing instability could translate to better health outcomes. Broader economic problems. In combination with low income, the American economy may face catastrophic results, as in the financial crisis of 2007 and 2009. One of the positive marks in the economy is that 71% of Americans say it is a good time to find a quality job, and those who are employed largely feel secure in their jobs, according to Gallup's recent survey. However, as mentioned before, housing takes up a substantial portion of households, meaning they spend less on items like food, clothing, and entertainment. From an economic point of view, this has a devastating effect on the country, since many sectors of the economy are forced to shut down as they have no consumers. As a result, most of the citizens barely meet their ends. At the start of 2022, 64% of the U.S. population was living paycheck to paycheck, up from 61% in December, and just shy of the high of 65% in 2020, the Lending Club report notes. With high inflation added to the picture, citizens have to spend the majority of their incomes on primary needs like rent, gas bills, and food, leaving little or no space for purchasing other items and services. Everything leads to a massive debt crisis that may soon put the economy in shambles. For instance, credit card balances for people ages 25 and younger rose by 30% in the second quarter from a year earlier, compared with an increase of just 11% among the broader population, according to a random sampling of 12.5 million U.S. credit files compiled by credit score company VantageScore. Lastly, adding the turbulent condition of the retail sector in America to the already struggling economy gives no hope for future stability. However, we will talk about the retail sector crisis in the next episode, so give a thumbs up to the video and subscribe to the channel to not miss any crucial economic updates.